Okay, let's kick things off with something, well, universally human needs. The presentation talks about 6 core needs that drive us all, like the need to feel loved and liked, to succeed and be recognized, to, I don't know, have fun and share with people, to learn and grow, to compete and win, and then to contribute to something bigger than ourselves.
It's fascinating, though, because these needs, they're not static, right?
What do you mean?
Well, the presentation really gets into this idea of need priorities. So, like, each of us ranks these needs differently, depending on where we are in life, our experiences, even just our personality. Like, imagine mapping out your own need priority chart.
Okay.
Would it look the same as your partner's or your boss's?
Whoa. Okay, that is a mind bender. Suddenly all those office conflicts are making a lot more sense. Speaking of work, you highlighted a section about something called better benefit goals.
Right.
What's that all about?
Well, it doesn't go super deep into it, but it's this idea that we need to move beyond just like recognizing people's needs. We need to design systems and structures that actually work for people.
Yeah.
It's like resonating with the whole conversation around work-life balance and like purpose-driven careers.
Gotcha. So understanding our needs and how they impact how we interact, that's key.
Yeah.
But what about the people leading the charge?
The leaders.
Yeah, the leaders. The presentation also talks about a huge shift in leadership styles. Moving away from that like old school command and control model into something, honestly, less like a military operation.
Totally. It's more about envisioning leadership as coaching and guiding values.
Oh, interesting.
So less about barking orders and more about nurturing self-management, collaboration, sharing authority. It's like, imagine a jazz band jamming versus a strict orchestra with a conductor. It's all about adapting, improvising, respecting each other's like unique contribution.
I love that. So it's less about being the boss and more about being the cool mentor that everyone wants to like impress. That almost makes leadership sound fun.
It definitely sounds more sustainable, I think.
Yeah.
Especially given all the demographic and economic changes the presentation outlines.
Right.
We've got the aging baby boomer population, the rise of single-person households, and then this prediction that attracting skilled labor is going to get way harder.
Yeah. The workplace is looking very different these days. Up to 4 generations all working together.
Yeah.
Talk about a potential for culture clash.
It's wild.
The presentation touches on how lifestyles are more important than age now. What do you think that even means, like in the context of all these demographic shifts?
I think it's saying we need to move away from those traditional, like, age-based assumptions. We need to understand individual needs and aspirations.
So less about assuming what someone wants based on their age.
Right. Recognizing that, you know, a 25-year-old and a 65-year-old might actually have more in common than we think, and they both bring valuable perspectives to the table.
That's true.
It's about flexibility, recognizing that people want a fulfilling life regardless of their age.
I see. It's about like understanding what really motivates people, no matter their age or background. Creating systems that support all these different needs. It feels like this ties back into the whole better benefit goals thing we talked about before, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's all connected. Which brings us to another big point. How do we navigate economic success in this new world?
Okay.
The presentation argues that innovation is key, especially in what it calls the fifth economy.
Wait, fifth economy? That sounds kind of sci-fi. What even is that? I need like the ELI 5 explain like I'm 5 version here.
Think of it as the world where technology is the dominant force, where things change really, really fast. And traditional economic models are being totally disrupted. The gig economy, artificial intelligence, remote work, these are all part of this fifth economy.
Okay, that makes sense. But the presentation also talks about the anatomy of innovation. And it doesn't sound all sunshine and roses. It talks about skepticism, doubt, like periods of struggle.
Right. Breakthroughs don't usually happen overnight. It's a process, and often a messy one. Yeah. The presentation seems to be saying we need to be ready for setbacks, embrace uncertainty.
It's like that saying, if at first you don't succeed.
Try again.
Exactly. Or maybe just take a nap and come back with fresh eyes. Speaking of feeling overwhelmed, let's talk about this information beast. The presentation doesn't hold back this constant flow of bad news, manipulative algorithms, and like advertising overload. It feels like we're drowning in information sometimes.
It's tough. The presentation even points out how we might get good at tuning things out, but anger that keeps us engaged.
Oh, that's so true.
It's like how much of our online interaction is driven by outrage.
A lot.
It's kind of vicious cycle.
It is, and it makes it so hard to like focus on what actually matters.
Yeah.
So with all this change and uncertainty, how do we even make sense of it all? The presentation calls for clearer, more empathetic communication. What does that actually look like?
I think it starts with recognizing we're all in this together. We're all dealing with these challenges, even if our experiences are different. It's about listening to understand, not just to respond, being willing to see things from other people's perspective.
And maybe putting our phones down every once in a while and having a real conversation.
That couldn't hurt.
But seriously, I mean, the presentation seems to be calling for, like, human-centered leadership in a world that often feels very dehumanizing.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a powerful message. And maybe a good place to pause and let all this sink in. We've covered a lot. Those fundamental needs that drive us, the changing landscape of leadership, the crazy pace of change in this whole fifth economy thing. It's a lot to process.
Yeah, we've been on quite a ride.
We'll be back in a flash to continue this deep dive. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about that feeling of being overwhelmed in the information age, constantly bombarded with news and opinions and everything. But the presentation doesn't just leave us in that state of, like, digital overwhelm. Yeah, it actually gives us this kind of compelling equation for future economics success.
Okay, an equation, I'm listening. Math was never my strong suit.
Right.
But when it comes to economic success, I'm all ears.
Well, it's pretty simple, actually. It's just technology x resources.
Okay.
Basically, it argues that having awesome tech isn't enough. We also got to consider all the resources we've got, natural and human, to make it all work.
Right. It's like having all the ingredients for an amazing meal, but not knowing how to cook. You need the raw materials and the knowledge to make something great. So where does innovation fit into this equation?
Well, the presentation suggests that new technology really comes from collaboration.
Makes sense.
And thankfully, we're living in a time where collaboration has never been easier. Think about all the potential of AI, machine learning, and all these online platforms that connect us across the world. We have a huge opportunity here.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. We can brainstorm with someone on the other side of the planet in real time.
Yeah.
It feels like we're on the verge of this, like, golden age of problem solving. As long as we don't let the robots take over, of course.
Right. Well, the presentation does acknowledge the potential downsides of, unchecked tech.
Sure.
But it really emphasizes that right now we have the maximum potential for innovation. It's like we're all standing at the starting line of a race.
Right.
We've got all the tools, but it's up to us to decide where we run and how we use them.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
But also kind of daunting,
Yeah.
Like, with great power comes great responsibility and all that. We got to make sure we're using all this wisely, not just for profit, but for the benefit of everyone and the planet, too. Speaking of humanity, the presentation has this great reminder like, hey, guess what? We're all human. It might seem obvious, but it's easy to forget in this digital world where we're often reduced to data points.
Yeah, it is a powerful reminder, especially in a world that can feel so divided these days. The presentation seems to be calling for a return to empathy. That understanding that we all share the same basic needs and desires.
Totally. We're all just trying to figure things out, make sense of this crazy world. Hopefully leave it a little better than we found it, right?
Exactly.
But the presentation acknowledges that things are tough for a lot of people. It's not all sunshine and roses out there.
Absolutely. We can't pretend everyone's benefiting equally from all this change. We need to think about the human cost of progress and realize that some folks are being left behind. It's about approaching the future with compassion, not just blind optimism.
Right. We can't just focus on the shiny new gadgets and the economic growth without considering the impact on real people and communities and the environment. It's about finding that balance.
Exactly. A way to progress that benefits everyone. Which brings us to the core message of this whole presentation.
Okay.
The future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create.
Ooh. Okay, I'm feeling empowered now. But where do we even begin? We've covered a lot of ground here. Is there, like, a cheat sheet? A Cliff Notes version?
Well, the presentation does give us a really good summary of the key takeaways.
Okay.
It starts by reminding us that human behavior is all about needs. And finding balance between those needs is super important.
Right. We talked about that earlier. Understanding our own need priorities and those of the people around us. It's like having this secret decoder ring for human interactions.
I like that, yeah.
It helps us understand why people do the things they do.
And it gives us a way to build better relationships, better systems, too.
Totally. And then it goes on to talk about how leadership is changing.
Okay.
Moving away from that old command and control to a more collaborative, inspiring approach.
The jazz band analogy, right?
Exactly.
Creating an environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and able to contribute their talents. Be the coach, not the dictator. And that kind of leadership is way better suited to today's workplace, especially with all the demographic changes happening.
Right, with multiple generations working side by side, each with their own experiences and expectations and work styles.
It's a recipe for both conflict and incredible innovation.
Totally. And it all ties back to that idea that lifestyles are more important than age, recognizing that everyone wants a fulfilling life, no matter their age or background.
Yeah.
And we need to create workplaces that actually support that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got the needs and the leadership stuff down. What else is in this presentation's highlight reel?
Well, it emphasizes embracing innovation, but also recognizing the challenges that come with it. Remember that whole anatomy of innovation
Oh,
thing?
yeah, that roller coaster of excitement, doubt, struggle,
Yeah.
and then hopefully breakthroughs. It's not always easy.
But the presentation encourages us to be bold, take risks, and not give up when things get tough. Progress rarely happens in a straight line.
I like that. Permission to embrace the mess.
Right. And then it goes on to highlight the challenges of the information age. We need clearer, more empathetic communication.
Yeah, we all have that friend who's like constantly posting those inflammatory articles and getting into online arguments. It's exhausting.
It is.
The presentation wants us to step back from all that and focus on building real connections.
Exactly. Be mindful of the information we take in. Think critically about what sources we trust. And be more intentional with how we communicate.
It's about choosing kindness over clickbait.
Yes. And finally, the summary ends with this really powerful message. The future is full of uncertainty, but we can adapt and shape it.
Okay, I like that. It's a call to action. We're not just passengers on this ride. We have a say in where we're going.
It's about recognizing our ability to make choices that impact not just our own lives, but the world around us.
I'm sensing a theme here. It's all about taking ownership, isn't it?
Ownership.
Yeah. Owning our needs, our leadership styles, our choices, even when things are uncertain.
It's about being active participants in shaping the future, not just watching it happen.
I like that. Much more empowering way to look at it. So the presentation gives us the big picture, the key takeaways. But I'm curious, how do you personally make sense of all this?
You know, for me, it all comes back to that idea of human connection.
Okay.
In a world that can feel increasingly isolating, it's more important than ever to find ways to connect with each other.
To remind ourselves we're all in this together.
Yeah.
That we're all just human, trying to figure things out, find meaning, create a better world.
Exactly. And that leads to the final question the presentation asks, a question we want to leave you with as we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Okay, hit us with it.
So, given everything we've talked about, changing human needs, leadership styles, this crazy pace of innovation, the information overload, what steps can you take to not just survive, but actually thrive in this new era?
That's a good one. We'll be back in a bit to unpack that question and offer some final thoughts.
Right.
But for now, take a moment to think about it. What resonates with you? What are your answers to this question? Welcome back to the deep dive. Before we left you to ponder, we threw a pretty big question your way. How do you thrive in this era of constant change? It's easy to feel like a tiny boat, right, in a vast, stormy ocean. But remember, you're not just drifting. You've got oars, a rudder. You even have a compass.
And a pretty awesome life jacket, too, in the form of this deep dive.
Exactly.
The key takeaway is you have more agency than you might realize.
You really can navigate these choppy waters.
Got this.
And remember, those 6 core human needs we talked about. Understanding your own need priorities is like plotting your course on that compass. What really motivates you? Where do you find fulfillment? Once you have a sense of that, well, you can start making choices that actually align with those needs, whether it's your career, relationships, or even how you spend your free time.
And it's okay to adjust course along the way. Just like a sailor adjusts their sails to the wind, you can reevaluate those need priorities as you grow and change.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've got the compass part figured out. What about the whole leadership thing? The presentation talked about that shift from command and control to a more collaborative coaching style. How do we apply that to our own lives, even if we're not, CEOs or running for office?
I love that question. I think it starts with recognizing that leadership isn't really about a title. It's not about your position. It's more about how we interact with everyone around us. It's about inspiring people, motivating them, empowering them to be their best selves.
So less about barking orders and more about being that awesome camp counselor that everyone looks up to.
Exactly.
Someone who can build trust, encourage teamwork, and create a positive environment where everyone feels valued.
Yes. And those skills are so valuable no matter what you're doing. Leading a team at work, organizing a community project, even navigating family dynamics can benefit from these skills.
It's about creating a shared vision and working together to achieve it.
Exactly.
And, if you find yourself stuck in an environment that's clinging to that old command and control model, remember, you can be a catalyst for change.
That's true.
Speak up, advocate for better communication, and look for those opportunities to collaborate.
Remember, the presentation mentioned attracting skilled labor is getting harder and harder. Those who can create truly engaging, fulfilling workplaces, they're going to have a huge advantage.
They will.
No.
Okay, let's talk about this fifth economy for a minute.
Yeah.
And this constant wave of innovation. It's easy to feel swept away, like you're always trying to catch up with the latest tech.
It's true. The pace of change can feel really overwhelming. But remember the anatomy of innovation we discussed. Breakthroughs usually come after periods of doubt, of struggle.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, take a breath. You're not alone.
Maybe even take a digital detox day, reconnect with nature, or dust off a board game, have a good old-fashioned game night with some friends.
I love that.
Just find ways to unplug, recharge. Give yourself some space to think.
Exactly. And when you're ready to dive back in, focus on developing those core skills that work in any environment.
Like what?
Critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, communication. These are the skills that will always be valuable, no matter what crazy stuff the future throws our way.
They're like your trusty toolkit.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the future, I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, but we really do have the power to shape our own destiny.
I love that. The presentation reminded us we're human, we've faced challenges before, and we're amazingly resilient.
We got this.
We do.
And in a world that feels more and more isolating sometimes, let's not forget the power of human connection.
Yes.
Let's reach out to each other, share our struggles, celebrate our wins, and just support each other through it all.
Let's be kind, stay curious, and never stop asking, how can we make things better?
Beautifully said. And on that note, fellow deep divers, we're signing off. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into this fascinating world. And hey, if you figure out how to build a time machine, let us know, okay?